Welcome back, my favorite detectives. Today we're going to be checking out some incredible videos on crime scenes, solved and unsolved mysteries. And let me know what you guys think in the comments section if you enjoyed the solved mysteries or the unsolved crimes more. Yeah, let's get right into this. There is a trigger warning, and if you have any tips, please call 1-800-THE-LOST. Let's get right into these. All right, let's jump right in with Celestials. This one is about Molly Kendall living with the actual Ted Bundy. I want to know, what do you guys think it was like to live with a serial killer like him? Let's get into it.
They would play games around the house while her mother was at work. But one night they were playing hide and seek, and she said she saw the outline of him underneath the blanket. So she pulled the blanket off, revealing a naked Ted. She was shocked and asked what he was doing. Ted told her that he could turn invisible, but his clothes couldn't, so he had to be naked so that she wouldn't see him. As part of the game, they had to run back to home base, which again, Ted is fully nude. During this, Ted fell down, and his member was hard. She didn't know anything about male anatomy because she was just 7, and she asked him if it hurt. And he replied it didn't hurt, but Molly said there was a noticeable change in his eye. She then said she was tired and wanted to go to sleep, but he insisted on reading her a bedtime story, and that's when she noticed the sheet was all wet. As for what she's publicly spoken about, this is all that happened. She said that at the time she didn't tell anyone because she didn't want to hurt her mom, and she assumed that Ted had just gotten too carried away with the game. And the last story I'm going to tell is that 2 times Molly said she saw the dead look that Ted would get in his eyes that his survivors described before they escaped his crimes. Twice they were out swimming, and there was a raft that Molly was using to hang on to, but Ted kept pushing the raft out of her reach. He stood there just watching her as the child grew tired of treading water, and then he would bring the raft closer, she would reach out, and then he would pull it away again. And this went on for several minutes until he eventually gave the raft back. Molly and Liz were originally in hiding, but they have come forward, and they're the subject of the documentary on Amazon Prime called Ted Bundy Falling for a Killer. It's interesting that they both dyed their hair and cut it short when Ted was known to go for brunettes with long brown hair parted down the middle. If you learned something new, like this video and let me know in the comments, and follow for more.
This next video is from They Will Kill. It's about Carrie Farber and Dave Krupa, and this is absolutely one of the craziest ex-girlfriend stories I've ever heard. You guys have got to let me know what you think about this, and if you have ever had any crazy exes in your life, let me know.
2012, Carrie Farver started dating a man named Dave Krupa. The relationship remained very mutually casual, and then in November of 2013, Carrie asked Dave if she could stay at his house for a few days because it was much closer to a conference she was attending for work. Carrie left for the conference on the first day, and 4 hours later, Dave received a text from her asking if he wanted to move in together. When Dave responded that he wasn't ready for that, Carrie sent a string of very aggressive texts telling him they were over. The next day, Carrie's mother received a text that Carrie was quitting her job and moving to Kansas City, which Carrie's son Max confirmed had been something she had been talking about. Carrie's family didn't get too concerned until she mentioned that she had broken up with Dave and was considering checking herself into a mental hospital because Carrie had struggled with bipolar in the past, and so at that point her mother reached out to police for help. Police spoke to Dave, who said that Carrie had continued to send him very aggressive texts, including one that threatened his ex-girlfriend, Liz Gallagher. Carrie continued to send harassing messages to Dave and Liz, up to 50 or 60 a day. And these messages escalated to the point that they included photos and videos of the inside of both of their homes. Dave and Liz spent so much time together discussing Carrie's harassment that they eventually started dating again. Soon after, someone burned Liz's house down as she was moving out of it, and Carrie sent Dave a message saying, "I'm not lying, I set that nasty on fire. I hope the and her kids pass away in it." She sent Liz a message saying, "I hope you and your kids burn to death." Carrie's family continued to plead with her to come home, but she said she'd moved in with a new boyfriend and was trying to get back on her feet after she'd suffered a mental breakdown. Meanwhile, she stalked and harassed Dave to the point that she started threatening to take the lives of his children, which led him to buy a gun to protect himself. This went on for 3 years, and eventually Dave and Liz's relationship started to cool off and they broke up again. And one day, Liz showed up at the police station to file a report against Dave's ex and the mother of his children, a woman named Amy. Liz claimed that Amy had been stalking and harassing her through Facebook and that someone had stolen Dave's gun recently and wondered if maybe they'd had it wrong all along and it hadn't been Carrie that had been stalking them, it had been Amy. The very next day, Liz said that Amy came up to her as she was sitting in a park, attacked her, got her on the ground, and shot her in the leg. Amy had an alibi for the time of the shooting, and police had also taken a fresh look at the case and found some very suspicious photos on Liz's phone, including one of Carrie's SUV with the timestamp of 2012, which was right before she went missing, and also some photos that had been sent to Dave from Carrie. Then brought in an IT expert who found dozens of email addresses, Facebook accounts, and apps that were all linked back to Liz, and they were able to link back every single harassing message to Liz's IP address. Police then pretended to believe Liz that everything she was saying about Amy was true and used this as a cover to get tons of information out of Liz about what exactly had happened to Carrie Farver. In the end, they learned that Liz had taken Carrie's life in Carrie's SUV on the morning that she left Dave's house to go to the conference. She then assumed Carrie's identity and used it to harass herself and Dave for years in an attempt to get back together with Dave. Liz was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. I struggle to think of any other cases that are as diabolical as that, but I'm dying to know if you know of any others.
Next, we have The Truth Sets You Free, and this is going to have a trigger warning attached to it because there is SA and abuse in this, so just be warned that this could be triggering.
Listen to what this 5-year-old girl from Orange County, California, told her mother her father did to her.
Daddy was heading the meeting, and he wore a real-life baby foot around his neck. She says they each drank the blood, and then they all hurt me. Said, how did they hurt you? She spread it. It's right here.
And it gets worse. According to his family, this severely traumatized 10-year-old boy, also from Southern California, was allegedly molested by a trusted neighborhood minister as part of an ongoing satanic cult.
Jimmy talks about having a gun held to his head, about being shown a skeleton, about having to touch the skeleton. He has drawn pictures of a child being sacrificed. He's talked about animal sacrifices. We found out she had been defecated on, that it was smeared all over her body and put in her mouth.
My children have talked about all of those things and worse. They've talked about having to kill other children. And she was made to take a gun and put it up to someone's head. It was another child, and pull the trigger. And to this day, I'll get in the middle of a story and I'll think, they're going to think I'm crazy. This sounds crazy. But when you begin to hear this same thing time and again, different stories, but the same horrible underlying things, the same behaviors in the kids, I just want to scream.
I'm a stranger. I come up to you and you tell me this story and I say, I don't believe you. How do you react? What do you do?
I just say, well, that's your right not to believe it. But someday, if you see something or you hear something from somebody else, just remember what you heard from me.
If we were lying, I don't think we would come up with such good lies.
This next video is from Charlie Bourne from True Crime, and it's about Sally Ann Bowman from London. Just be advised that this is a pretty sad and disturbing story.
Sally Ann Bowman was born in 1987 in Carshalton in South London. She had 3 sisters and was very talented and attended the Brit School for Performing Arts and Technology in Croydon. As you can see, she was very beautiful and she had dreams of becoming a professional model. After leaving school, she worked as a part-time hairdresser and tried to make it as a model. In 2005, she joined Pulse Model Agency. She actually became the face of Swatch watches. Her career was going from strength to strength and it looked like all her dreams were about to come true. That was until the 24th of September 2005. Sally was 18 at this point and was starting to go on nights out. On the night in question, she was out with her sister and a group of friends. They went to Lloyd's Bar in Croydon and stayed there until around 1 a.m. Now CCTV captured her leaving the bar and she waited around 15 minutes outside for a taxi. She then contacted her ex-boyfriend Lewis Sproston, who offered to pick her up. The pair initially broke up due to accusations of them both cheating. However, that night Lewis picked her up from Croydon town centre around 2:20 a.m. He drove her to her house in Beinheim Crescent. Unfortunately, in the car, they got into another argument about the cheating rumours, and Lewis actually sped off at around 4 a.m. as Sally got out of the car. Shortly after this, neighbours reportedly heard screaming but didn't actually go outside to see what was going on. Sally Ann lay outside having been stabbed in the neck and stomach. She was AR'd as she lay dead or dying. Her belongings were stolen, including her cardie, her bag and her phone. She was found deceased next to her home, and police initially thought that Lewis was to blame. He was arrested and held for 4 days until finally DNA evidence eliminated him as a suspect. It wasn't until 9 months later this man was arrested. This was 35-year-old Croydon man Mark Dixie. Police had luckily managed to swab Mark 2 weeks earlier for having been involved in a brawl in a pub where he worked as a chef. The DNA they collected matched the DNA on Sally Ann. In court, Mark would admit to R-ing her after finding her on the ground outside her house. He denied murdering her, though. Infuriatingly, he said he did not realise she was dead or dying when he found her. He was found guilty and sentenced to a minimum of 34 years. Frustratingly, it was actually then revealed that Mark was already a convicted serial S offender. He'd obviously been free to kill Sally Ann. He's unlikely to be considered for parole until at least 2040 when he's around 70.
This next video is from Rob and Haley, and it is all about solved mysteries, solved crimes. All these cold cases have been solved, and these are probably one of my favorite kind of stories. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you like the solved crimes or the unsolved crimes?
So many cold cases were solved in 2023, so here are 7 more, and strap in because this is a long one. Pamela Lynn Conyers. 16-year-old Pamela was heading to the mall in Maryland in 1970 when she was abducted and murdered. She was strangled, and the killer dumped her body near a highway that was under construction. Despite physical evidence being collected, though, her case went cold for 52 years. But in 2023, thanks to genetic genealogy, her killer was identified as Forrest Williams. He was 21 years old at the time of the crime, and in the years after, he had a petty criminal record but was never caught for any other violent crimes. Unfortunately, Williams died in 2018, so he cannot be charged in the murder. Ricky Ridings. 27-year-old Ricky was found shot to death inside a truck in Callaway County, Missouri in 1981. Ricky had been known to be involved in a crime ring of stolen drugs and cars, but he had been killed and there were no witnesses or evidence in his murder. In 2017, police received information about a man named Charles Schmidt who was serving a life sentence for a different murder case. Schmidt had admitted to killing Ricky in a recorded phone call from prison, so authorities began pursuing capital murder charges against him. In 2023, a charge of manslaughter was ultimately decided on after Schmidt agreed to sit down with Ricky's family to answer their questions about the crime. That conversation occurred in August, and Schmidt was sentenced to an additional 10 years. But he will be in prison for the rest of his life due to his other sentence of life without parole. Jennifer Odom. 12-year-old Jennifer was abducted and murdered after getting off the school bus in Pasco County, Florida in 1993. She had been beaten to death and her body was discovered in an orange grove days later. In 2015, DNA evidence led investigators to arrest a man for a very similar crime in the same area around the same time. Jeffrey Crum was identified through investigative genealogy as the man who had abducted, beaten, and essayed a 17-year-old high school student just over a year before Jennifer was killed. Because of the similarities in the two cases, Crum became a suspect in Jennifer's murder. And investigators then retested evidence found at Jennifer's crime scene and officially linked Crum to her murder. He was already in prison on other charges, but in July he was formally charged for the murder of Jennifer Odom. And prosecutors have announced that they are seeking the death penalty. Diane Olkwitz and Terry Erdman. 19-year-old Diane was found dead in the warehouse she worked in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin in 1966. She had been stabbed over 100 times. 5 years later, 15-year-old Terry was found stabbed to death behind a department store in Milwaukee, and she had suffered upwards of 60 stab wounds. While the cases seemed similar enough for investigators to question if they were connected, they remained unsolved for over 50 years. But in October 2023, there was a break. Investigators exhumed the body of Clarence Tappendorf, who was a delivery truck driver that delivered a shipment across the street from the warehouse where Diane was murdered the day she was killed. Tappendorf died in 2008, but in 2023, DNA genealogy pointed investigators to his relatives, who then voluntarily gave them the DNA samples they needed to confirm that he was the killer. Amora Wiggins. On January 28, 2012, a resident in Opelika, Alabama, discovered a skull. Police searched the surrounding area and found more remains, and detectives were able to determine that the skull and remains belonged to a girl somewhere between the ages of 4 and 7 years old. Evidence from her bones indicated that she was malnourished. While forensic artists created an image of what this Jane Doe may have looked like, the girl, who became known as Opelika Jane Doe, remained unidentified. In January 2022, her remains were sent to a Texas lab belonging to Othram, which is an organization that specializes in forensic genetic genealogy. Their DNA extracted from the remains was used to build a genealogical profile, which was then uploaded to a genealogical database. Finally, after 11 years unidentified, in January 2023, Othram confirmed that the Opelika Jane Doe had been identified as Amora Wiggins. Her father was then identified as 50-year-old Lamar Vickerstaff, who was born and raised in Opelika, Alabama. Detectives then traveled to Mayport Naval Station in Jacksonville, where Vickerstaff was stationed, to notify him of his daughter's death, but upon notification, he did not provide any information about who his daughter was. His wife, Ruth, who had been married to him since 2006, told detectives that she also did not know who his daughter was or who her mother was. Eventually, 37-year-old Sherry Wiggins was identified as Amora's mother. Upon notification of her daughter's death, Sherry provided documentation showing that the Vickerstaffs had obtained legal and physical custody of Amora in 2009. Her visitation with Amora had been suspended, but she continuously paid child support to Vickerstaff since 2009. On January 17, 2023, both Lamar and Ruth Vickerstaff were arrested and charged with felony murder and failure to report a missing child. On March 22nd, a preliminary hearing was held for both of their cases, and in it, the detective said that Ruth had confessed to having custody of Amora. She claimed that she became overwhelmed with having to take care of Amora and requested that Lamar take Amora to his family. Allegedly, Lamar also confessed to murdering Amora during his police interview, but he later denied inflicting the injuries seen on her remains. He claimed that he had attempted to bring Amora back to life after the murder. He also requested that his wife not be charged in Amora's death. Ruth was granted bail and has returned to Jacksonville with an ankle monitor as she awaits trial, where she will be facing up to 10 years in prison. Lamar was denied bail and remains in jail awaiting his trial. If convicted, he faces either life without parole or the death penalty. At least now Amora has a name. Herman Brown. 36-year-old Herman Brown was found dead inside his apartment in 2003 after a neighbor called 911 to report a stench coming from the apartment. Herman had been strangled with an extension cord and stabbed multiple times, and the apartment was covered in blood. There was DNA from the blood evidence and other DNA at the crime scene, but his killer was not identified until 2023. Comparing the DNA from the crime scene to a genealogical database, Herman's killer was identified as now 64-year-old Robert Stewart. Stewart was arrested and is currently in jail awaiting his trial on the charge of the first-degree murder of Herman Brown.
All right, this one is from Crime Scary, and it's about Andromeda J. And this is probably one of the saddest stories to me, in my opinion, because when people just want to have fun and be with their significant other, and for something like this to happen, it's just absolutely so sad. And I just hope y'all are just safe out there with who you give your love to.
One she went on a romantic date with, he spiked her drink hoping it would make it easy for him to have intercourse with her afterwards, but unfortunately, her body could not handle the potent level, making her experience cardiac arrest that she wasn't able to recover from, thereby killing her.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me.
This case will be taking us to Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati is a city located in the southwestern part of the state of Ohio. Cincinnati is the largest metropolitan area in Ohio. It is a city of over 300,000 residents. Cincinnati is most known for its rich German heritage, unique chili, and as the origin of America's oldest baseball team. It's home to America's oldest baseball team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, which was found in 1869. Andromeda J was born on March 28, 1995 and was affectionately known by her friends as Nini or Awofejua. She was a young lady of Ghanaian descent who lived in the States. She is the daughter of Pastor Glitter Soa J. She and her parents were based in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio. Nini was a popular person on all social media platforms. She was into beauty as a whole but mostly spent her time as a hairstylist. She owned the salon called A Hoof Styles. She showcased some of her handwork on social media.
Yes. So cute.
Nini is also known to have trained as a pharmacy technician. She was said to be a very happy, outgoing, energetic and sweet young lady.
This next video is from Metro UK, and it's about Alice Wood running over her boyfriend, Ryan Watson. Just be advised that this can be pretty triggering, especially if you have problems with cars.
She insists her boyfriend's death was a tragic accident. 23-year-old Alice Wood has been convicted of murdering Ryan Watson after a row at a party. They had an intense argument, and when they got home, Alice drove directly into him. But she didn't stop there. As Ryan tried to walk away, she hit him a second time, knocking him over the bonnet and under the car. That's when she drove off, dragging him 500 feet along the road. But Alice claims she didn't realise he was trapped underneath the car. She's due to be sentenced at the end of January.
All right, so now I got another one by Charlie Born True Crime. This is probably one of my favorite stations on TikTok. If you guys are not already watching them or following them, make sure to do so. These are just really sad stories, especially since it has to do with Christmas.
A 14-year-old has shot and killed his sister over Christmas presents. Abrielle Baldwin was a 23-year-old mother of 2. On Christmas Eve, she was at her nan's house with her brothers, 14-year-old DeMarcus and 15-year-old Darcus. According to reports, an argument broke out over Christmas presents and DeMarcus shot Abrielle in the chest. It's believed she was holding her 11-month-old child at the time. It's reported that DeMarcus was upset that Darcus had received more Christmas presents than him. The other brother, Darcus, then apparently shot DeMarcus with a different firearm and then fled the scene. DeMarcus and Abrielle were rushed to hospital, and unfortunately Abrielle passed away. DeMarcus was described as being in a stable condition. Abrielle had 2 sons, a 6-year-old and an 11-month-old, who are now left without a mum. Darcus was taken to a mental health facility, and once released he will be moved to a juvenile assessment centre. DeMarcus has been charged with first-degree murder, child abuse and delinquent in possession of a firearm. Darcus has been charged with attempted murder and tampering with evidence.
All right, next we have Making a True Crimer, and by his own words, he says that this has got to be one of the most scariest deaths. So make sure to stick around and find out how it is like the scariest death.
Saskatchewan, Canada. He had dreams of becoming an NHL player. He was actually a first-round pick of the New York Islanders, but because of several injuries, he never actually made it to the NHL. In August of 1989, he would travel to the Stubai Alps, which is in Austria. He was actually intending to go to Scotland, but he passed through here on his way. He was expected to make it to Scotland on August 12th, but he never arrived. 6 weeks later, the car that he borrowed from a friend was found at the Stubai ski resort. So they spoke to the people at the resort, and they said that in fact was there. To them, it appeared that he was going to do some snowboarding before he continued his trip. But nobody knew where he was. He just vanished. So he was reported missing. And he would be missing for 14 years. In 2003, some people nearby saw a glove sticking out of a melting glacier. In the middle of that glacier, McPherson's remains. I can't show those images because, you know, TikTok. His arms had both been amputated. So were both his hands and both his legs. His body was quite literally in pieces. Now, apparently there is some science behind the fact that if a body is inside of like a glacier like this, I guess a body can separate. But based on the actual bones and where the injuries and fractures were, and this is also his snowboard that was found inside the glacier with him, and you can see that it has some severe like cutting on it. This is another image where you can see the damage to the snowboard. They also found his wallet, which in there they found cards with particular damage. It looked like the teeth of a tiller on a snow tilling machine. So these teeth right there. The machine that in question also has this on it. Very large machine with a lot of machinery and very large metal claw things. When experts looked at his bones, they determined that there was no way that his body had separated through the natural process of like it being stuck in a glacier like that. They said his bones were separated, could only be explained by machinery. So this is what they think happened. This is an image from the mountain he would have been snowboarding on. This is the tilling machine they would have used. They believe that Dustin somehow got injured on that mountain. They believe it was very foggy, and as he was lying on the ground waiting for help, the tilling machine ran over his body, tearing him to pieces. They said it would have peeled the skin off of his bones. It would have ripped his limbs off. These parts right here would have absolutely annihilated his body. Not only would he be crushed to death, but he's also dealing with the agony of having his skin peeled off of his body, his limbs being torn off. Now, one could only hope that if this was how he died, that he didn't experience it for too long. That hopefully he would have died fairly quickly, but they can't say for sure. It would have been probably pretty foggy, hard for the driver to see. They did confirm they were driving these with skiers on the mountain. It would have been so loud he wouldn't have heard the blood-curdling screams of the man he was destroying. I was reading that one of his legs could have possibly, just based on this, could have gotten stuck in this machine before it was taken off, and it like basically just rotated it until his leg was like pulled off. They were even able to determine that he was likely alive for a little bit of this because there was certain damage to his bones that indicated he tried to remove himself from the machine. But they can't say that for sure. They can't confirm that this is the way he actually died, but the evidence shows and proves that it was likely done by a machine and not by some natural method. So, what they believe happened is either the driver realized what happened after the fact, was afraid of possibly losing his job and being, going to trial for manslaughter because he had broken safety protocols, or they think maybe he was drunk. And again, the whole trial and manslaughter stuff. They even think he may have had help from a supervisor, basically move the body to where it was eventually found. Again, they can't confirm it, but that is the ultimate likelihood. And if that is the way he died, Jesus Christ. I sincerely hope. I have to just believe that he did not feel it for too long, because that is hell on earth, and I would wish that on nobody.
This next video is from RAR W Podcast. I think that's what it's called anyways. And it's about the Dardeen family. And unfortunately, this is a unsolved murder still because it was just so gruesome that it really couldn't even be put on the news or anything. But hopefully with programs like this, we can bring these people to justice. And if you guys have any tips, please call that tip line.
The family consisted of 29-year-old Russell Keith, wife Ruby Elaine, who was 30 and 7 months pregnant at the time, and their 3-year-old son, who they had named Peter. The growing family had recently moved to the small town of Ina, Illinois in 1986 and were living in a rented-out trailer near Route 37. And though this was a small town, it did not have a reputation for being the safest. During the past 2 years, this small town had experienced 15 homicides, including that of a 10-year-old girl that had recently been murdered in the area. This had left everyone in the town, including the Dardeens, on edge, and in fact, when a woman had approached the trailer asking for help one night, Keith would flat out deny her and ask her to leave the property. The family had felt so unsafe here that Keith had told his mother, Joanne Dardeen, that regardless if he had a job lined up or not, he and the family would be moving out of the small town by the end of the year. But then came the night of November 17th, 1987. Keith, who had always been described as a reliable worker, had failed to show up to work that night, and after workers and family had failed to reach either him or Elaine, they decided to contact the police. Keith's father had agreed to meet with officials at the Dardeen residence, unaware of the horrors that they were about to discover. There is a major trigger warning for the rest of this episode, but once Keith's father and officials had made their way into the household, they would discover 3 bodies that were tucked inside Keith and Elaine's bed. The bodies had belonged to that of Elaine, their 3-year-old son Peter, and the newborn infant that Elaine had given birth to during the attack. All had been found deceased in the bed. Keith's body was nowhere to be found within the house, and much to the shock of the family, this led investigators to believe him to be the prime suspect in this case. But that theory would be put to rest when just the very next day, a group of hunters would find Keith Dardine's body about a mile away from their trailer. He had been found, shot 3 times, and then sexually mutilated. His car would also later be found right in front of the police department in that town. The town immediately began to swirl with rumors, as over 30 detectives had to chase down over 1,000 leads, but unfortunately those leads really came to nothing. There was no sign of an affair, drug use or drug selling, or any type of gambling debt that the family could have had, and this went on for years until one solid lead came up, which I'll have to make in a part 2.
This last video is from Danielle Holland, and it is actually a solved case. Unfortunately, this girl had been tortured for over 24 years by her own dad.
Joseph Fritzl doesn't want the world to see his face. What he did for 24 years in the cellar of the family home is all too well known.
Elizabeth Fritzl was 18 years old when she went missing from Amstetten, Austria. But she lived with her parents, Joseph and Rosemary, and she had a huge family. And home life was chaotic because it's actually believed her father started to abuse her at only 11 years old. And at the age of 15, she graduated from school and went on to take courses to become a waitress. She was trying to take these courses to become a waitress, to get a job, to get out of her home, to basically escape Joseph. But it became way too much before she was able to succeed, so she ended up running away. She ended up in Vienna, but within 3 weeks, authorities found her after Joseph and Rosemary reported her as missing. Elizabeth ended up just giving in and going back to the waitressing course, and by mid-1984, she finished and she was immediately offered a job. But unfortunately, this opportunity was taken away from her when her father ended up luring her to the basement of their home. He would draw up plans for machines that he was selling through his job, and he would also renovate a lot of things down in the basement, so no one in the family really questioned it when he walked up to Elizabeth and asked her to carry a door down with him. Elizabeth held the door in place on its hinges while Joseph proceeded to secure it into place, and as soon as the job was done, Joseph unexpectedly shoved Elizabeth into the room and held an ether-soaked towel over her face until she eventually went unconscious. Now, nobody else in the home saw Elizabeth go down to the basement with Joseph because for the rest of the day, nobody seemed to question why she never came up. All the family knew is that by the end of the day, they were unable to find her, and Rosemary went into a panic and immediately reported her as missing. But the problem is that Elizabeth had already run away once before, so everyone was kind of under this assumption from the get-go that Elizabeth had just run away again, and you better believe that Joseph was making sure this theory sunk in.
All right, thank you so much for watching till the very end. I really appreciate it. I hope that you're enjoying these videos. If you are interested, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you are entered to win the gift card giveaway. Once we hit 500 subscribers, I'm going to have a $25 gift card to give to someone. So make sure that you have the opportunity to get it into your pocket. And also let me know, do you guys like the solved or unsolved crimes more? I like the solved ones better, but I like them all. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you in the next video.